Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex, coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of... In this episode, I've returned to my TBR pile from last year, and I'm reviewing Sweetheart, Sweetheart by Bernard Taylor, which this was recommended to me by the viewer Sloan Chessman and the booktuber The Bookybus. And if you're unfamiliar with the work of The Bookybus, I have included a link to her channel in the description section of this video, so be sure to check her out. Aside from them recommending this classic to me, I buddy read this with my good online friend Gina, which, as always, we had a great time discussing the characters and the plot, but at the same time, we gushed about how this book never let go of us. Like, we honestly could not put it down, and we just kept going until we could actually figure out the mystery behind everything. So, yeah, this was a lot of fun. And since this is the second Taylor book that she and I have read and enjoyed together, we have gone on and dubbed ourselves as huge fans of Bernard Taylor, and I look forward to expanding my library with more of his books. But before I get started, I would just like to say thank you to Sloan Chessman and the Bookybus for recommending this, and thank you to Gina for reading this with me. Also, if any of you are watching, I hope you enjoy this review. Now, without further ado, let's see what's lurking around the shadows of the quaint cottage on Girard Hill. Sweetheart, Sweetheart by Bernard Taylor is told in first-person perspective, and it introduces the protagonist named David, who is concerned for the well-being of his twin brother Colin after he doesn't receive a birthday card from him. However, shortly thereafter, he does receive a letter from Colin, and even though this does put him at ease, it doesn't stop David from having headaches and feeling god-awful. Then, one day, out of the blue, David is hit by this unexplained pressure, and while he feels like someone is squeezing his heart, he receives a vision of Colin. Once composing himself, he decides to return to his homeland of England to check on Colin's well-being, which this is when he learns that his sister-in-law Helen and Colin have both died 10 days apart from one another. But to make things even more peculiar, he discovers that they both died on the property of Girard Hill, which is the same property that he has now inherited. After he arrives at the cottage on Girard Hill, he sees that it's this quaint, picture-perfect setting that anyone would kill to have. However, the longer he stays there, the more he comes to the realization that this property is haunted by a malevolent spirit that now wants him all to herself. Sweetheart, Sweetheart was Bernard Taylor's second novel that was published in 1977. Eventually, this chilling tale was reissued in 1992, then again in 2015. And since its release, Douglas Winter has hailed it as one of the finest ghost stories ever written. And in the reference book, Horror 100 Best Books by Stephen Jones and Kim Newman, Charles L. Grant said it was the best ghost story he had ever read in novel form. Fun facts! Here's some things you might not know about Bernard Taylor. Much like Bernard Taylor's life, the protagonist of Sweetheart, Sweetheart was born in England, then he temporarily lived in New York. After a stay, he returned to England. Yet, unlike the protagonist, while Taylor lived in New York, he went into the theater where he became an actor, and during his year at the Queen's Theatre, he took up playwriting. Upon his return to England, he continued acting and writing, where he eventually won Thames Television Most Promising Playwright Award. Now that we have that covered, it's time to move on to the spoiler section. And if you haven't read this book before, I'm about to reveal some things that could ruin the experience for you. So if you like, scroll down to the comments and you'll see that I have a pinned comment at the top with the timestamp in it. Once you click that timestamp, it will direct you away from the spoilers and bring you to the thoughts section. Now, you only have 17 seconds to do this. So, ready, set, go! Since everyone's had the opportunity to click away, I would like to talk about a few of my favorite moments. First up is the scene when David uncovers a corpse that was buried nearby where this old summer house once stood. Now, leading up to this, we understand that there was a possible lover's triangle in the past. And this comes about because back in the day, Helen was living with this guy by the name of Alan. But while they were living together, this is when Colin moved in with them. And after a dispute happened, Alan ended up moving out. So after we gain that information, we're kind of mulling over everything, and this is when the author kind of takes us in this direction and shows us that David is on the fence in regards to if he wants to keep this property or not. Well, over time, a lot of shit goes down, and one day, David confronts his housekeeper, Jean, and tells her to leave and not come back because he thinks that she's trying to harm his girlfriend, Sheila. However, Jean is actually innocent, and because she's dealing with a lot of emotional issues, she tries to drown herself in the pond out back. Then, after David rescues Jean, he meanders around the property trying to think of what to do next. And as he goes over to where the old summer house used to stand before it burnt down, he decides that he's going to follow through with Colin's plans and build a new summer house in its place. But while he's thinking about this, he picks up a stick where he starts poking around at the soil, and he comes across a human head. Which this is when he does some digging and uncovers a full-bodied corpse on the property. And since the body still has skin and hair, he assumes that this is a fresh kill. When this twist happened, Gina and I were in complete disbelief that this was actually Alan's corpse. And after we had a chance to talk about it, this really put us on the edge of our seat with nothing but questions. Like, on one hand, we were considering if this really was Alan's dead body, then who was making the harassing phone calls to David? Were they coming from beyond the grave, or were they coming from a completely different individual that the reader had not been introduced to yet? Or, on the other hand, if this really wasn't Alan's dead body, then who was it? Why was the body there? So, because of all of these questions and the degree of mystery that this subject brought to the book, Gina and I honestly could not put this down until our curiosity was satisfied. Also, in a way, I kind of find this to be amusing because instead of David actually calling the authorities to report this, all he does is cover the dead body back up, then he goes inside to drink. Which, a part of me kind of thinks if I found something like this, I'd be like, nope, not today, Satan. I would cover that shit back up, then I would go inside and crack open some whiskey. But at the same time, I would probably end up reporting it to the police because, one, I want to exonerate myself of being a guilty party in this shit, and I also do not want to be guilty of covering up evidence. So, regardless of what I decided to do, this honestly would have been the straw that broke the camel's back, and it would have caused me to haul ass without looking over my shoulder once. The next moment that really surprised me was Jean's death, which, prior to this, David had welcomed her back to the cottage because he discovered that Jean had never done anything to hurt him or Sheila. Instead, everything that had gone wrong was because of a jealous ghost that wanted him all to herself. But, anywho, we eventually get to an evening where David realizes shit is going to hit the fan, so he has to get himself and Sheila out of there pronto. So, as he's zooming down the driveway in his car, he accidentally hits the cat that's been hanging around their property. Well, without Sheila exactly understanding what's going on, she jumps out of David's car, grabs the cat, and against David's wishes, she runs inside the cottage to try to get help. However, when David goes to retrieve her, Jean stops him and explains that she believes if he goes inside, Ronan's spirit will harm him. Then, after Jean convinces David to stay outside, she assumes that she can go inside the cottage because she's not the target of the ghost. But while this is all going down, there's been this really huge storm that's hit, and it's progressively gotten worse with high winds. So, when Jean gets ready to go inside to rescue Sheila, the high winds picks up a slate from the roof and flies that slate across and cuts into Jean's head, killing her. I honestly did not think Jean was going to get killed, but considering she was going to interfere with what the ghost was scheming, it makes sense. Also, I truly hated it when she got killed because she was one of my favorite characters. Like, she had been through so much shit, and it doesn't seem like she was ever able to really rise above. I mean, she was able to clear her name with David, so there's that, but it just seems like she deserves so much more than what happened to her. And I'm not just talking about her death, I'm just talking about in general. Like, she was one of these poor people who constantly had crap poured on her, and there was nothing she could do about it. And I really wished I could have jumped through the pages of this book and just given her a big hug to let her know everything was going to be okay. But, of course, everything wasn't okay. Now, aside from that, I was really surprised with how brutal this scene played out. Like, the description, it was just chef's kiss, gory as hell, brutal, and even though it was exciting to read, at the same time, it really just stabbed me in the heart because I was seeing this happen to one of my favorites. The final moment that left me with my jaw dropped was Sheila's death. Now, after Jean died, David and Reese run into the cottage to try to find Sheila. And after not having any luck, David eventually hears Sheila calling for him from the cellar. Then, after he runs to the cellar door, he sees that even though the door isn't locked, it won't open. So, after David hacks down the door with an axe, Sheila comes running up the stairs towards him while holding the injured cat. And this is when the cat loses its shit and attacks her, which, in turn, this causes Sheila to fall down the stairs and land on top of a box where she gets impaled with the same croquet finishing post that they had earlier been using to play croquet with. But wait, there's more, because as soon as Reese explains that Sheila will be okay due to the finishing post not going that deep inside of her, the old Welsh dresser that's been sitting nearby starts to rock. And although David and Reese try to hold the piece of furniture back from toppling over, they are unable to keep a grip on the furniture, and not only does it fall on top of Sheila, but it actually hammers her down onto the finishing post until it kills her. When Gina and I read this, we were surprised, which I think the main reason why is because after we had read The Reaping, we didn't think that Taylor could write an ending that was this devastating. And after Sheila died, we admitted to one another that we thought for a minute Sheila was going to be okay because Reese said that the post didn't go in that deep. But, of course, that was all blown to hell. Also, I love the degree of foreshadowing that Taylor gave to the tools that led to Sheila's death. And I think this is where a good portion of the suspense came in for me, because even though throughout the story Taylor had greatly emphasized these items, I would never have considered them coming together to kill somebody. So for this reason, major kudos to Taylor for creating something I had never seen before. I would like to take this opportunity to bitch about Ronan. Y'all, this crazy-ass chick really brought into perspective that if you have someone who is batshit insane, there's a good chance they're going to be more dangerous dead than they were alive. Like, for example, before Ronan kicked the bucket, she murdered her husband, she killed his mistress, and then to make it look like they ran off together, she killed the poor horse, which, for some weird reason in my mind, I decided to name the horse Clip-Clop. I mean, I guess if you're gonna kill a horse, the name Clip-Clop does kind of sound fitting. Anywho, as I was saying, in death, Ronan kills around 5 people, which, I'm not gonna lie, that's pretty impressive considering her main focus is trying to bukkake every male that comes into her cottage with ectoplasm. So, overall, I think that the moral that we can walk away with here is if someone is a territorial nutjob in real life with a bad case of the drips, death ain't gonna make things any better for them. Sweetheart, Sweetheart by Bernard Taylor was a beautifully written but creepy ghost story. And if you like to coordinate what you read with a specific time of year, this book takes place in May. However, at the same time, I really enjoyed reading this for Valentine's Day. But more importantly, I feel like this book provided me with some great characters and a setting that had a lot of character in itself. Not to mention, I loved how this felt like Taylor's love letter to Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca. As far as themes are concerned, this book focuses on scorned lovers, obsession, and how hauntings can be a reminder of the past. Plus, Gina and I noticed that there was a lot of really cool foreshadowing and symbolism. Character-wise, everyone was solid and they all felt very realistic, which, among the lead characters like David and Sheila, I really felt concerned for their well-being because they were such a sweet couple and I wanted to see them succeed. And among the secondary characters, we gained some pretty good development as well, especially when it came down to Dr. Reese and Pipkin, who were both sweet and a wealth of information. But among the secondary characters, I absolutely love Jean, and I just wish I could have jumped through the book to give her a big hug, because she had been through so much crap and she always received the short end of the stick. Other than our human characters, I love the character that Gerard Hill and the cottage presented. Like, at first, everything about this place just seemed like it was this beautiful, brightly lit English landscape that would be perfect for a romantic getaway. But as we continue reading, we discover that Gerard Hill has this sordid past that's full of death, and it is nowhere near receiving its fill of bloodshed. Which I thought it was absolutely brilliant how the author took a place that felt so inviting and made it so deceiving. And in a way, I think that this is really urging for the reader to understand that looks can be misleading. Theme-wise, this book shows the devastation that a scorned lover is capable of, which, at first, this is seen by how Ronan reacts when her husband tries to leave her for another woman. Then, after Ronan dies, we see her wrathful spirit constantly ripping apart every happy couple who moves into her cottage. Even though this wasn't specified, I really believe that Ronan's ghost was in the mindset of, if she wasn't going to be in a happy relationship, then no one was going to be in a happy relationship. Which, because of her jealousy and angst, I was reminded of The Woman in Black by Susan Hill, especially by how The Woman in Black preyed on happy families. But even if this is the case, without a doubt, Ronan's main goal is to find a man, even if that man doesn't want her. Also, I really feel like Sweetheart, Sweetheart is a cautionary tale that warns happy couples to beware of outside persons who are trying to sabotage their happiness. Next up is the subject of obsession, which this isn't just seen by how Ronan's ghost obsesses over the men who move into her cottage, but this is also a huge part of why David stays in the cottage. Like, for example, as the book progresses, he is getting red flags left and right that things are not going good, especially when his girlfriend moves in. Then that's when things really start going downhill. So the red flags are there, but instead of him leaving, he stays because he's trying to solve the mystery of what happened to his brother and his sister-in-law. Now, to be honest, if this happened to an immediate family member of mine, I would probably be obsessing as well until I received closure. So it's really a slippery slope in regards to what David goes through. And I really believe that this is another element of the book that's cautionary, but from this aspect, it warns people to beware of obsessing because it can lead to dire consequences. Also, before I move on, I would like to note that this is the first time I've ever encountered a book where it feels like it's taken the Fatal Attraction scenario and has put it in a paranormal setting. And last, we have the subject of how hauntings serve as a reminder of the past. Now, in most cases with the ghost stories I've read or seen on TV, the ghost wants a living person to solve an unsolved mystery of the past so that spirit can rest in peace. Well, that's not necessarily the case with this book, because I don't believe Ronan wanted David to know about the past. Instead, all she wanted was a lover. And because of the determination that she has to find a lover, this really speaks volumes on how a person's will can be so strong that it can last longer than their living body. Aside from themes, I really love the foreshadowing in this book, which, out of everything I've read, I really have to tip my hat to Taylor because of how skilled he was in constructing this. Like, by how he focused on the croquet set, the cat named Girly, Ronan's dresser. I honestly just thought he was focusing on these subjects to add character development to those who were around them, which it did, but I was really surprised to see how all of these elements came together for a grand finale. Now, as far as symbolism is concerned, Gina and I noticed 3 different subjects. One being the cat named Girly, which in the book it states that Girly is white and black. So if Girly is a tuxedo cat, superstition says that tuxedo cats are supposed to be good luck. But in my mind, I imagine the cat having more black on it than white, so I really don't know if it falls into the good luck category or the bad luck category. But personally, I felt like it was a bad omen. After that, we spoke about the blackbird on the chimney, which for the majority of it, the blackbird represents death. But it also represents intuition, defensiveness, intelligence, adaptability, seriousness, and the list continues. Also, we do have the magpie that shows up in the painting, which at first the magpie was actually a bluebird. And this part is literally spelled out for us because as David is recognizing this, he explains that bluebirds represent happiness and magpies represent doom. And of course, this magpie is always over his girlfriend's head in the painting, so yeah, that doesn't really bode too well for her. Overall, Sweetheart, Sweetheart didn't scare me or gross me out. However, it was pretty damn creepy, and after Gina and I read this, all we could do was just ramble on and on about how we did not see the ending coming whatsoever. And I honestly have to say this is probably one of the best endings I've read in a ghost story in a very long time. Sweetheart, Sweetheart by Bernard Taylor was a slow-burning ghost story that became more intense the further I read. Now, what really surprises me is no one ever really talks about this book when discussing ghost stories. And that really surprises me because even though this book didn't scare me like some of the other ghost stories that I've read, I would totally rank this up there with those stories because I really felt different about this book compared to those. Like there was a level of comfort with this book at first. And what I mean by that is, with the cottage on Gerard Hill, it felt inviting, it felt like a place that I would like to stay. then all of a sudden the rug gets yanked out from under the reader and we realize that no one in this story is safe. So at the end of the day, if you're looking for a good ghost story that is full of thrills and chills and really doesn't focus on blood and gore, then I do highly recommend Sweetheart, Sweetheart. Well, now that it's time to close out, I would like to thank these awesome people for contributing to my Patreon account. As you can tell, some of the names listed here are creators, so be sure to check out their work. And if you would like to contribute to my Patreon account, a link is available in the description section of this episode, where for $5 a month I'll give you a shout out at the end of my videos. And if there is any sort of title or profession you would like for me to tie to your name, just let me know and I'll gladly do that. Also, I do have a $10 tier available where you'll still receive the shout out at the end of my videos, but I do creepy photography on the side, so at the beginning of every month, I'll send you over one of my creepy photos. From there, you can print it off, do whatever you like. So if you're able to do this, that's awesome. If not, no sweat. I just hope you return to this channel so we can have a good time together. Also, if you would like to hunt me down on social media, links to my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok are all available in the description section of this video. And if you have not subscribed to this channel, be sure to subscribe and click that notifications bell because I have more book reviews coming in the near future. So, until we see each other again, I hope you are doing well and sweet nightmares.